Hello, I'm Alan, and today we're going to be talking about hybrid computing. So we have a panel here. I'd like to welcome our panelists, and the topic is going to be along the lines of hybrid computing. So let us go through some introductions, starting at the top. Duffy, why don't you kick us off? Tell us a bit about yourself, your company, and perhaps by answering, what are some of the trends you're seeing around hybrid computing that are shaping the future of Kubernetes?
Awesome. So my name is Duffy Cooley. I'm the field CTO at Isovalent, which means that I help a lot of our customers understand how to best make use of technologies like networking and eBPF inside of Kubernetes clusters and in other environments, and that's been a lot of fun. I think hybrid computing has been helping these and helping trends I've been seeing in hybrid computing in the space. I think what I've been noticing is that there is definitely a need. It's like people are starting to adopt multi-cluster environments and also environments in different areas or that are areas in different from one another. Sometimes in their own data center, sometimes they want to burst to the cloud, sometimes places. And I think that that's a form of hybrid computing because it means that you're going to be running that hardware locally, and you're also looking to pick up machines that may be running a different architecture in a different cloud environment due to cost. And this is I think probably the biggest driver for the multi-cloud stuff that I've seen is like that sort of space.
Great, thanks for that, Leonardo. I'll pass it over to you. Same question.
All right, hi everybody. My name is Leonardo Murillo. Everybody calls me Leo. I'm Principal Partner Solutions Architect with WeaveWorks. And my job is to work very closely with our partners, including AWS, trying to find solutions for our clients and how to use EKS and the whole suite of EKS products, EKS Anywhere, EKS Distro, to build large-scale enterprise architectures. Now, as far as the question, I think hyperscale and fleet scale is something that we're seeing over and over. And this is very much associated to, for instance, the telco vertical or IoT, where we're looking at an increasing complexity in managing very, very large scale fleets of clusters that are distributed and running in very heterogeneous environments, right? And that brings forward complexities in terms of operation, which is where I think, for example, patterns such as GitOps come into play, as well as day two operations, right? Managing the life cycle of these clusters is complex. And I think Kubernetes will, as a project, right, will evolve new mechanisms, right, to make it easier for organizations to handle this level of complexity.
Great, thank you. Zachary, how about yourself?
Hey, thanks, Alan. It's great to be here. My name's Zachary Smith. I'm the managing director of Equinix Metal. As commonly known, Equinix is the world's digital infrastructure company. And so we offer data centers in over 200 places around the world, 64 markets.
Zachary, we can't really hear you. You're breaking up.
Oh, okay. Come back to me. I'll work on my microphone here. How about that? Can you hear me now?
Nope, still.
I can hear Zachary well.
I can hear you well as well. So.
I think it's on your end, Alan, where you're having trouble.
Okay, shall I keep going?
Okay, go ahead,
Keep
Zachary,
going.
Then. Okay, cool. I'm going to keep going then. And so we have about 10,000 enterprise customers around the world. And what we do with Equinix Metal is try to make it easier to access the global reach that our enterprise customers are looking for, as well as the interconnection capability that they need to reach all their various partners, all their different cloud ecosystems, and connectivity options. And so I would say that our business is definitely interacting with customers who are going through a hybrid multi-cloud journey. They're either digitally native from the start, or they're transforming and investing heavily in digital. And what that means is that they're trying to move faster. And we see that that is the major trend as it comes to Kubernetes is a transformational tool for our customers, which is number one, how can they look at moving faster with their very, very complex, I love what Leonardo said about heterogeneity. We see every one of our large enterprise customers having not one of something, but a lot of everything, from applications to providers to complexity of locations and whatnot. So investing in the technology to be able to move in a complex hybrid world. And then also culturally, a lot of our customers are on a big journey to figure out and how to transform their organizations, and people transformation and cultural habits around how they manage risk, how they deploy and manage applications, where they use those in their businesses, and the skill sets that they need. And so we see Kubernetes being a very big investment point for our customers, mainly around cultural transformation, just as much as technical transformation.
Great, thank you for that, Zachary. Frederick, I'll turn it over to you.
Yes, hello everybody. So Frederick Maliki, I'm a CTO for the Southern region at Atos, so covering Iberia, France, and Italy. And among my main responsibility, I'm in charge of innovation, portfolio, and also supporting our client in their digital transformation. And this is where Kubernetes is playing a key role. So 1 year ago, we have announced our One Cloud program, so which aim at bringing together all our assets to support our client transformation to cloud. And when it comes to Kubernetes, we see it as the main component to accelerate our client transformation and enable multi-cloud and hybrid deployment. And we see Kubernetes in the future at different scales, from large clusters hosted in hyperscaler, and still we mainly see Kubernetes being used in a public cloud environment. But now we see also more and more use cases leveraging this edge to cloud continuum, and we could see also Kubernetes even at the device level, at the edge level, where the data is being captured and processed, and then of course, in the cloud. And we see also some trend, in particular in Europe and in France, with sovereign cloud, where, from my point of view, Kubernetes has a key role to play. Because when we think about sovereignty or trusted cloud, I think Kubernetes, by bringing this multi-cloud dimension, providing also the interoperability across the various cloud providers, and bringing this abstraction layer. So it's playing a key role, right? So, and when we think about indeed the sovereignty dimension, it's not limited to the data only. It's not only addressing the operation, but the software dimension is also important. That with the open source part, I think Kubernetes is taking, it's filling all the box, right? I was listing before. And we see more and more use cases with our client in research, in energy utility, when we think about the electric vehicle, as an example, where we need to have a common platform, so from the car up to the edge and then in the cloud. So again, we see Kubernetes playing a key role more and more and everywhere for the future. I hope I answered to your question, Alan.
Absolutely, thank you for that. So let's actually start with Zach. Zach, how has the role of bare metal changed in the cloud native ecosystem over the, let's say, the last 5 years?
That's good, timely. So I was acquired by Equinix back in March of 2020, and previously I'd started Packet, which was a bare metal compute platform, in 2014. So up close and personal with the concepts of portable software needing programmatic infrastructure. And I think what we've seen over the past few years is a big acceleration of software, which is able to kind of work on any infrastructure, and developers who are taking more and more control over that process. And what we've missed, I think, until in recent years, was a substrate that was sufficiently programmatic to allow control against a diversity of different hardware devices. And this is internally at Equinix, what we like to say, we have several 100,000 racks of co-located infrastructure in our facilities around the world. And our customers have all types of different needs, whether it's from a storage perspective, from a compute perspective, networking or accelerators or whatnot. They have all kinds of diversity. And so now that we're trying to take this kind of what I'm going to call very, very manual co-location product and turn that physical infrastructure to move at the speed of software, this is where bare metal becomes relevant, where really you can take this physical infrastructure substrate called co-location and turn this into digital infrastructure, where suddenly it's programmable and can be done repeatably, and you can use those same kind of DevOps mentalities and idempotent control of software on your infrastructure. That I think has really opened not only the investments that people have made. We've donated our bare metal provisioning platform Tinkerbell into the CNCF, which is incubated there, helping infrastructure become more portable and more reusable in private data centers, in neutral connected data centers like Equinix, or in public cloud. And so I think that's just widened the market for enterprises who frankly have a lot of physical infrastructures throughout their enterprise data centers.
Great. Anyone else wish to add?
Uh-oh.
Folks working on trying to figure out things like cluster API Tinkerbell, which I think is really exciting, and coming from have some good friends working on that project, and it's really exciting to kind of see that take off, especially as it relates to the cluster API project. This is I think in my opinion, as a Kubernetes person, I would say that it's really important to think about how to deploy Kubernetes clusters kind of as a purpose-built Kubernetes clusters that you can kind of easily recreate and reprovision if you need to. And I think that some of that work there is really lining up with that. One of the things that associates with that, and this actually kind of ties into the EKS Anywhere model, is the ability to create effectively a flat pod network across multiple clusters, and we call it multi-cluster mesh. It gives you the ability to for networking and observability and security across multiple clusters that you could spin up leveraging cluster API inside of EKS Anywhere. Exciting stuff.
Absolutely. Anyone else?
I think there's an interesting component that kind of resonates with the whole idea of cluster API and Kubernetes as this level of abstraction that looks to provide kind of a common operating model as well as common developer experience. And it's the fact that Kubernetes is evolving to become not just a container orchestrator, right? Yeah. Rather the control plane of everything. And what Sekar was saying, right? Kubernetes is effectively becoming the control plane for even bare metal, right? You can actually coordinate the operations and lifecycle using the Kubernetes API. And I think that's very relevant to being able to manage hyperscale and fleet scale diverse operations. The one gap that I think it's interesting for us to eventually talk about, particularly in this kind of hybrid world, is how the development loop is still somewhat complex, right? How providing the developers with an effective experience still has gaps that I think as a community, as we kind of merge in together all these different realms of expertise, right? The whole idea of data center as a service and the hardware as a service and the Kubernetes project, right? How we can provide access to this diverse landscape in a way that is very friendly to the developer is going to be key to kind of like furthering the adoption that we're already seeing, right? Because it's the traction is unquestionable.
Yeah, and that's actually a pretty good segue in terms of the power of the Kubernetes API. Leonardo, I'll ask you this question, but how does GitOps really improve the security posture of an organization delivering applications in a hybrid environment?
There's a lot of ways to answer that question. So I think for one, the fact that you desired state. So I'm not going to go into kind of like in depth as to what principles of GitOps are all about, right? But when you think about having the desired state in a store, in a repository that guarantees traceability, auditability, you get of course, something very solid to begin with, right? You know exactly what changed, when it changed, is immutable, it's versioned. And if you use Git, it's distributed, right? You have many copies of it, and everybody can see the truth, right? There's also a risk that I think gets pretty much eliminated in terms of continuous delivery pipeline hijacking, right? Because when you have agents running in your cluster, where you have agents that are actually pulling this state, and applying the necessary actions to reconcile your desired state with your runtime with your desired state, the risk of malicious actors modifying the actions taken is dramatically reduced, right? Because you are storing a description of your desired state. You still need to protect your CI, right? You need to make sure that your artifacts and your supply chain is secure, that your artifacts are trusted. But once you have this barrier that clearly creates a boundary between CI and CD, matter of fact, is to continue to deliver and deploy, you don't even need external access to push into the cluster. You can pull from within, right? All those characteristics, I think, together provide a lot of let's call it built-in security to the operating model that bring in a lot of that reduce the effort necessary to maintain a solid posture.
So, question for everyone: for organizations that haven't yet adopted GitOps, what's the best way for them to think about starting?
Yeah, I think we should look.
No, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to say that from my point of view and the experience I see with my client is that we should not start with Kubernetes only from a technology standpoint, but really approach it at the organization level. And it's not only about the technology, but also about the organization, as you said, Leonardo, about the CI/CD pipeline and the different processes and way of working we have between our development team and the operations. And we really need to start thinking about the concrete use cases that we want to implement and where Kubernetes is indeed relevant. And we have some experience. Duffy, you talk about EKS Anywhere as an example. So we made a prototype very recently for one of our clients in the manufacturing space. And it was really fundamental for us to think about the use case and the benefits it will bring to our client, and then ensure also that beyond the technical part, we also set up the right organization to benefit from the values that Kubernetes is bringing. So it's all about the agile organization, SRE kind of model, and to going beyond the platform itself, meaning what Kubernetes is bringing to my business. And for example, for this specific client I was referring to, we are modernizing its application, replatforming them to allow him to get more flexibility, some interoperability as well, and then avoid also vendor lock-in, which is one of the key requests he made to us. So yeah, my recommendation would be indeed not to limit it to the technology, but also to address the whole dimension, the organization, and the processes as well in the organization.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of that. I would say that, whenever we're trying to adopt a new technology, especially something like GitOps, the right way to start would be to really dig into what the problem you're trying to solve is, right? Frequently, people adopt things like GitOps because they're looking for a transactional method to understand the changes that are happening to clusters over time. Sometimes they're looking to adopt GitOps to be able to define some declarative state that they will apply consistently across multiple targets, across multiple clusters, and GitOps can do all of these things. It can be a part of the recipe for success across a variety of different areas. And I think that what's important is that you just pick, one or maybe two things that like the functionality of something like GitOps would apply, and then, evaluate the different frameworks that are out there, evaluate the different solutions that are out there, determine what your operating model will be, whether it be a push or a pull model, whether you're using an agent or just applying things in the way that you're probably applying things today, but using a CI environment, and then figure out from there, how to graduate to something that you're happy with in a production environment.
Yeah, I'm gonna second a little bit of that, and I want to point in on something that Frederick mentioned. This is what we see with primarily our enterprise customers. Service providers are a little bit different, where they have much more kind of control of their own software stacks, where they might have the ability to make more fundamental changes, and they're kind of used to being operators by default. What we see with our enterprise customers, it's much more of this cultural kind of transformation. And so oftentimes, and this is why I would say, like, if we're investing in or interested in, say, a GitOps model, looking at the organizational structure and figuring out, hey, what are we trying to do here? Per Duffy's comment, I think most enterprises are going to say we want to move faster. That's what we hear. We're trying to move faster with software. And I think then making sure that you find something small and recognize that what you're doing is a pretty big cultural transformation, and that the point of it is not to move extremely fast, or the point of it is not to have this outcome. The point is to learn and get good from an organizational model and break down some of those, I wouldn't call them, kind of cultural norms. For example, UAT testing styles, 3-month release cycles, planning purposes, the concept of monitoring and observability and risk, which are generally negatives, in some traditional models, which become part of your process in a GitOps model. So I think that a lot of this can be used as an experimentation with enterprises. And as long as you know what you're maybe looking to do is experiment with a new operating model.
Yeah, that's actually what we're seeing a lot and what we hear from our customers as well. So Frederick, can you elaborate about some of the use cases in which some of your customers have sovereignty constraints for their workloads?
Yeah, so we have some use cases in many different sectors. So like energy utility, for example, I talk about the electric vehicle, and one of the main challenges about energy roaming or network optimization, also, for the charging of the vehicle, or the electric grid, where you fuel the network from the car batteries. And to do that, we need a common abstraction layer across the ecosystem, right? And this is where we are building this ecosystem data platform, which need indeed the Kubernetes infrastructure at the bottom to enable the use cases I was referring to before. Another example is in finance, where we are working, for example, on fraud management platform. So within the ecosystem, so we see more and more use cases where we are expected to build a platform which will serve a full ecosystem, and where indeed various customers, partners, or even sometimes competitors will be contributing to the development of the same services and platforms. So we have other example, for example, in manufacturing, with supply chain optimization as an example, where we are deploying Kubernetes clusters in research, also where we have several, for example, in France, a research institute contributing to a single project where they need to build, to contribute to the development of applications jointly together. And indeed, Kubernetes is enabling this ecosystem and this development platform. So these are just few examples. I could take many others. For example, within Atos, we are part of the Gaia-X initiative in Europe, which is this sovereign cloud initiative, which aims to build this multi-cloud interoperable environment at the European level. And of course, Kubernetes, from the various dimensions we talk about, is playing a fundamental there. So becoming the core platform, right, enabling all these data use cases I was mentioning.
Anyone else want to add to that?
Yeah, I'd like to talk about our experience with telecommunication companies, because I think that is very, very interesting, particularly because of the rise of 5G. Because telcos are in a very interesting position because they cannot deprecate anything, right? They have to run their 3G, their 4G, and now they have 5G, which means they're kind of like always in this position of growing complexity, right? Where they still have to worry about bare metal, where they still have appliances, they have devices that are deployed across regions, right? But as they evolve, they're looking to, well, they went from kind of like physical to virtualized, and now they're going into containerized. And the ability to operate this very complex landscape together with sovereignty concerns, because that's kind of like where this was coming from, right? Brings forward the need to enable organizations and developers to be able to transparently move across stages and across sovereign and not sovereign environments transparently. Because if you think about certain operational sovereignty, data sovereignty scenarios, that usually applies to kind of like production environments, right? But you want to make sure that the promotion of your artifacts, that the life cycle of your developers allows them to operate certain workloads on the cloud, because they, for development or integration, do not have the same constraints in terms of sovereignty that they would have to apply in production. So allowing them to use Kubernetes as this common platform that they can use to transparently move across these different stages while maintaining sovereign workloads for production, whether data or operationally, is something that we're seeing very, very often in telcos. And I think for telcos, there's another interesting challenge, and that's the coexistence of all these different generations of technology, right? And how some very established mechanisms of control must coexist with new technologies such as Kubernetes. That's kind of from our experience where we see out there, what we see out there.
Alan, maybe I can stop in here and answer a question that I saw in the chat, which I think it applies to this. We see this kind of use case of, I'm going to call it on-prem or interconnected colo movement of infrastructure, generally to those sovereign or edge-related environments. But one of the main use cases we've seen for like EKS, right, which is kind of this really interesting opportunity to bring, kind of a common control plane for enterprises into, attached, tethered, or private environments, has specifically been, this is to answer Isaac's question, over Equinix Fabric. So, cloud on-ramps to AWS in 38 markets. What we're seeing is a unique opportunity for customers who are invested in the AWS ecosystem and also have some, regulatory control, whether they want to use metal or colo, private cages, secure infrastructure, things that only they control, and they can connect and register those clusters over private connectivity. I think that's a really interesting enabler for these kinds of, sovereign workloads that need to kind of move back and forth between very controlled and maybe static environments, and kind of use of public cloud infrastructure and services.
Yeah, absolutely. So Duffy, based on everything we've discussed, how do you see the role of Cilium playing for hybrid computing landscape?
So I think it kind of plays a little bit into that question that we were just talking about data sovereignty and like different security environments and things like that. Where Cilium fits in, I think, really just it is a framework on which we can build a lot of really great functionality, leveraging the kind of the superpowers of Linux, like eBPF. And one of the biggest pieces that we get out of that is an incredibly rich amount of context about what's happening at the process layer and also at the networking layer, and being able to like identify exactly what process opened a connect call to some external piece, being able to like immediately shut down that connect call if it was determined to be not okay, being able to make important and complex routing decisions about where to route this stuff so that we can integrate with things like existing discrete firewalls in between particular zones, however you've actually created your security infrastructure inside of your data center. All of these things we're doing with people today with Cilium. I think it fits into that model pretty well. It kind of gives us the ability to bring a lot of great new technology to a lot of older problems, and really kind of level everything up a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. Anyone else want to add?
I'd love to. Yeah, I mean, I think like one of the things that we see with our customers is a movement from kind of, I'm going to call it siloed network environments where you kind of brought everything to you. We're talking MPLS and private line and telco and, you know, like IT controlled, very private, you know, environments to ecosystem based. And that's like the hybrid multi-cloud story that we see is people are accessing a variety of services. They're interacting with SaaS applications and partners. They're doing more business, you know, throughout a bunch of heterogeneous networks. And the ability with something like Cilium, huge fan, right, is to be able to provide kind of security substrates and related, you know, kind of observability across all these types of things. Because the one thing that we know is very bespoke and, you know, whatnot is networks and clouds versus networks on-prem versus mobile networks and telco. It's like, it's all very, very different and often somewhat a little bit walled, like we've seen in private data centers or whatnot. So having that ecosystem-based approach and being able to cut across that with something like, you know, eBPF is really powerful.
Anyone else?
eBPF is awesome. I love it.
Everybody hearts eBPF.
I confirm the ecosystem that you just mentioned is indeed very important, and this is really a trend that we see more and more with our client and within our environment. So it's the same. Yeah.
Right. So this is a question for everyone. What advice would you give organizations today that are embarking down the hybrid journey?
I would start with, you know, I always kind of default to an answer of what problem are you trying to solve. I think that like helps really nail down exactly like what your approach should at least begin to look like. When you're looking at hybrid cloud environments, I think it's important to understand like what you want to get out of it as an organization, right? Like what you're actually trying to solve, whether you're trying to lower the cost of compute, whether you're trying to improve the reliability of your services by deploying them into different environments or using a different technology, whether you're trying to improve the security of your environments by having a better isolation between you know, data sovereignty environments or what have you. I think that what's important is that you kind of just begin by defining like where you know, what you want to get out of it first. And then from there, you know, I'm a big believer in experimentation and iteration on things like this, right? So when you've actually got a pretty reasonable plan for what you want to accomplish, set about defining those environments and experiment with them. You know, develop a threat model if the security piece is important to you. Develop a resilience model if you're actually going for a more reliable environment, right? Do some chaos experimentation, figure out what happens if you turn off a data center and you lose that capacity. Are you still able to service applications? You know, like prove out that experiment that you have defined.
And just to riff off of what Duff is saying, because I agree entirely, like that's the first thing that came to mind, right? Like have a good reason to make that call, right? And I think Duffy speaks about, or what Duffy speaks about, is very much about measurement, right? You want to be able to have quantifiable, objective means to determine whether you're moving in the right direction, right? Whether these experiments, because I think a lot, for example, when you talk about chaos, right, Duffy, a lot of people, I think, still get the sense that chaos is just inject, you know, failure, right? But there is a whole scientific process to it. There is a hypothesis that you're trying to prove or not, right? Or so, and I think that applies to not just chaos. That applies to transformation and what Sector and Frederick were talking about, right? Adopting hybrid will have impacts into how your organization interacts and how your different teams work together, right? And what type of technology you're going to have to evolve into. So having a clear view of where you stand and what metrics you're using to determine whether you are making progress or not, I think it's critical for success.
Yeah, I'm gonna riff on that. I basically say like the first thing to, you know, in addressing a challenge is to admit you got a problem, right? And I think this kind of acceptance that most companies, whether, you know, digitally enabled service providers or enterprises, are gonna live in a hybrid multi-cloud world, whether they buy companies, they change technologies, they have to be in specific regions, they're regulated in certain areas. Like, it's complicated. And so just recognizing that this is like a big, like there's no simple answer to like turn on the easy button for all of this stuff. And so just recognizing the investment and complexity and being eyes open that, you know, you're going to live in probably, you know, a hybrid multi-cloud world, you know, and then investing in some of those core primitives that, you know, that can help you through that journey or help you to meet your, you know, as Duffy put, like decide what you're trying to solve. Is it availability? Is it cost? Is it security? You know, like, is it just a, you know, you want to move faster and ship stuff? Like, what are you trying to do? And then, you know, effectively invest, you know, around that.
No, I fully agree. I just add on what you said, Zachary. So most of our clients today are enterprise clients, so having a huge legacy estate. So when it comes to hybrid, for them it means mainly going to cloud, right? And indeed they need to think about the use cases and the value that cloud will be bringing to them, but also what hybrid model generate in terms of benefits. So, and as you said, there is no one single answer. We see indeed different expectations. So depending on the client, depending on the industry, it can be about resiliency, about more agility, about time to market, because indeed they want to go fast, they want to beat the competition, so they want to put their product to the market in a more efficient way. But yet, yeah, it's all about being more efficient and bringing more value to your businesses. So,
I had one thing that you brought to mind, if you don't mind me interjecting, which is the other thing that I've seen around just like an investment in a hybrid cloud strategy or B in Kubernetes in general is talent acquisition. Like a lot of companies find that they just cannot hire innovation talent without, you know, moving on this journey, right? And so I think there was a great keynote at reInvent a couple of years ago, which was kind of like innovation equals software and software equals cloud, right? And it, you know, to the extent that like if you don't have the capabilities to service your internal creators, your developers, your engineers, your product people with the tools they need or they want, it's pretty hard to attract that talent and keep them. So
yeah.
Yeah, for sure. It's one of the key areas of investment that every organization needs to make as they embark on that journey. So I'm going to give each one of you an opportunity to give a closing remark, but I'm curious, you know, what are you going to be up to this Kubecon? Anything you want to highlight as, you know, our audience should pay attention to? Why don't we start with Duffy?
So Kubecon, I mean, this will be the first large conference I've been back at in person, and it's really been great kind of connecting with people again and also welcoming a lot of incredible virtual attendees. I know that our attendance in virtual has continued to grow and that we're going to see like more and more folks showing up at KubeCon like over the years. So I think this hybrid model that we're doing here will continue to happen. Yesterday I hosted the eBPF day and I thought that was an incredible session. All of those videos will be up soon. And so if you're interested in understanding more about eBPF or exploring different spaces there, those videos will be up soon, and that will be linked probably from ebpf.io for that sort of content. And then for me, I'm looking forward to Wednesday when I actually present a talk with some good friends about exploiting a particular volume, and it's exploring a CVE in Run C, which is a super fun thing. So definitely check that out if you're going to be attending virtually or in person.
Zachary?
Well, I've got a couple of things. First off, it's just so good. One of the best parts about Kubernetes and in general this ecosystem is the community, right? It's just such an 100%. Awesome place to connect with other people who are passionate, who are open, who are trying to do great things for each other in the world and their companies. So like first and foremost, that's like our major goal. Secondly, we would love to connect with others, learning more about what their strategies are, what's top of mind, how's it going, and get feedback on some of the investments we're making, for example, in bare metal automation with Tinkerbell, so that's part of the, you know, in the incubation phase right now in the community in CNCF. And the third, which is totally like not to do with any of this, is we want to give away a lot of the cloud native community cookbooks. So we made a cookbook with a lot of our friends here in this ecosystem in partnership with the CNCF. you can actually add your recipes on github.com/cncf/cloud native community cookbook, or you get a hard copy. And so hopefully we can enjoy some food together as well.
Great. Leonardo?
Well, yeah, like Duffy and Zachary said, community is awesome, and I'm very excited. Matter of fact, I should have been in LA today had it not been for my flight gotten canceled yesterday. So I'm right after this, I'm getting an Uber to the airport and race to the gate. Tomorrow we're going to have a panel where we're going to be talking about the Open GitOps project and the GitOps working group that I think it's going to be very valuable. There's actually going to be representatives from AWS as well. For those interested in kind of like an end of day wrap up, the Cloud Native TV working group has daily wrap ups where we're going to be kind of like just going over what happened over the course of the Kubecon day. So listen in on those. Those are actually streaming on Twitch as well. And if anybody is out there, I'd love to meet up. Like it's been 2 years since I've been in contact with other human beings. So I'd love to kind of like be very close to everybody. So looking forward to seeing you all.
And Frederick?
Yeah, so this is the first time I'm participating to Kubecon, so it's very interesting. So I like also the community and the discussion we just had all together. So it's very enriching. So and I like indeed to learn from each other. So what you are doing, your strategy, your challenges as well, and just to see how we could best learn from each other. So I'm been very happy to be there, even if I'm remote today. So hope that next time I will be able to travel to the US and meet with all of you. But yeah, very useful and really enjoyed this conversation with all of you.
Excellent. So I wanted to thank our panelists. I think we are right on time, 1 o'clock. We've got a 15-minute break, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alan. Bye, y'all. Enjoy KubeCon.